Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm Major Garrett in for Margaret. We continue our conversation with Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. Governor, we started the show talking about not only the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago, but the affidavit that was released late this week. Many Republicans believe this is a political effort to harm and tarnish the reputation of former President Trump. Do you agree with them? And do you think the government has been transparent enough in this extraordinary set of events?
Well, it is an extraordinary set of events. It's never happened before with a former president. And so the very first day, I called for more transparency. And I thought it was a good idea for the Attorney General to finally come out and make comments. I thought it was a good idea for them to release some of the information on the affidavit. But we still don't know a whole lot. I mean, most of it was redacted. It didn't give us a lot of color. And so I think some Republicans are saying, without you showing us more to it, we think it may be political.
Are you satisfied?
No, I mean, I'd like to see more transparency.
What would you like to see that you haven't seen yet? Well,
it's hard to tell because in a federal investigation, they've got to keep some things confidential.
Do you want to know more about what the documents were?
We want to know whether or not it was justified or not. And so, on the one hand, it could be, as some Republicans think, just a political witch hunt. On the other hand, it could be really serious, federal felonies that we don't know about yet.
Where do you come down on that question? Witch hunt or legitimate exercise of the federal government's legitimate, not only curiosity, but prosecutorial interest in the handling of sensitive documents?
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that.
You haven't made up your mind on that?
Well, I don't know that we have enough information yet. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to believe that the Justice Department, the FBI, would take steps unless they had something pretty serious that they were investigating. We just don't know the facts yet.
Do you think there's any Republican hypocrisy remembering the locker-up chants from 2016 about Hillary Clinton and her email server?
Well, I think so, but I think there's also, some of the argument the Republicans are making is that they didn't really take these kind of these steps.
Then they're taking them now.
Yeah.
So you side with Republicans who are still very deeply skeptical about it.
I understand why it's dividing the country and why Democrats and Republicans view it differently.
As I understand your travel schedule, Governor, you're heading to New Hampshire again. You've been there before. You've been to Iowa. When are you announcing your 2024 bid?
Well, maybe this morning. No, I'm just teasing.
Go right ahead, Governor.
I'm just going to finish my term as governor.
Well, why are you going to Iowa and New Hampshire?
Well, I'm going to New Hampshire to help the Republican caucus, the House Republican caucus up there. I'm helping candidates across the country, but it's great to get out.
You are looking at it very seriously. True?
I think that's probably an exaggeration. I think we're going to finish the term as governor.
Lukewarm looking at it.
Lukewarm, maybe. Lukewarm.
Very good. In that context, as you think about what you may or may not do on the national stage, how either alarming or maybe giving you a moment for pause was it to see your preferred Republican gubernatorial candidate, Kelly Schultz, lose in a Republican primary for governor in your own state of Maryland?
Well, it was really
what does that tell you?
It was really sad, and it's what I've been talking about for 2 years, that this should be a really huge year for Republicans just because of the failures of the Democrats who are in control of everything and Biden's low approval ratings. But we could blow it by nominating unelectable people, and that's exactly what's happening across the country and why the wave is going to be more of a ripple rather than a tidal wave.
You called the winner in that Republican gubernatorial primary, Dan Cox, a QAnon whack job and a nut. I take it you're endorsing the Democratic nominee, Wes Moore.
No, I'm not endorsing anybody in the race, but what I'm doing is helping.
But you're bashing on the Republican nominee, isn't it the same thing?
I've just told the truth. When people ask me a question, I usually give them a direct answer, and I, made it very clear that this guy should not be the nominee and he shouldn't be governor. But I'm not getting involved in endorsing in the race. But this is not just Maryland. This is happening across the country. This is something it's why Mitch McConnell is saying we may not win the Senate. It's why we were hoping to pick up seats in governor's races, and now we're not. It's why the margin in the House is so much smaller.
Mm-hmm. It's curious to me, though, Governor. I mean, you won election and then you won re-election with a good number of Democrats in a blue state supporting you. They look to you in this question. You're going to sit out and not tell them
who you think
they
already have their mind.
Maryland should be?
I think they already have their mind made up. But yes, Maryland's only got 23% Republican. And I had to win, almost all the Republicans and independents and 25% of the Democrats to win. But this candidate is not going to do that.
So is for you, Governor Hogan, for the remainder of your active political life, election denialism a litmus test?
Well, it's certainly something that we shouldn't be focused on. Look, I think the voters are going to decide on issues like inflation, like the out-of-control
would you endorse
crime.
someone who denied that Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
No, I would not.
Would you actively campaign against that Republican?
It depends on who they're running against, whether it was a primary or not. But I've been supporting folks all across the country in Republican primaries that were running against candidates like that, because I think if the Republicans are to get any power back, we're going to have to start talking about the issues people care about and not relitigating what happened in 2020 or denying things that are fact.
So I want to talk about something that's somewhat topical in Pennsylvania and the governor's race there. GOP nominee Doug Mastriano posed for a picture in 2017 wearing a Confederate uniform. Now, this was part of a faculty photo at the Army War College. Now, Mastriano has a PhD in history. The district he represents in the legislature includes Gettysburg. Is this disqualifying in your estimation?
Well, it's the first I've heard the story, and I don't know the circumstances around it, but these are the kinds of problems that I think we're having. We have a similar situation in Maryland with an attorney general candidate who's
not disqualifying, problematic.
It's very problematic, and it could be disqualifying.
Could be disqualifying. Why? Explain to voters who are like, what's the big deal? What would you say?
Well, again, I said I don't know the facts regarding that, but this is just not the kind of way that Republicans are going to win races, that's for sure. And that's my big concern and what I've been talking about for 2 years.
So what is your assessment as governor of Maryland of the president's decision on student loan debt relief? Did he have the authority? Is it inflationary? Support against?
I'm not sure whether he had the authority or not, but I think it was the wrong solution to what is a real problem, but the wrong solution at the wrong time, because I agree it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Inflation is out of control. It's an issue we've tried to solve in Maryland by holding the line on tuition, by giving scholarships to community colleges, by removing the requirement for 4-year degrees, by trying to make interest deductible on your student loans off of your taxes. But just handing out money to people and being unfair to the people who worked hard to pay off their debt and pouring that money into the inflationary economy is really bad.
Back to politics. If Republicans underperform in this midterms, how much of that will be credibly attributed and blamed on former President Trump?
Well, I think the focus away from the issues and on to President Trump and away from the future and back to the past is going to hurt Republicans. It's a matter of how bad it's going to be.
What are your fears?
My fear is that we don't win the Senate, that we don't pick up gubernatorial seats and potentially lose them, and that I think we'll still take the House, but it's going to be closer than people think.
Republican Governor Larry Hogan, pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We are joined again by Directors of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, and Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent, Robert Costa. Bob, I want to start with you. In your conversations with Republicans, quite separate from the drama at Mar-a-Lago, what is the Republican sentiment? Do they feel they are losing momentum?
There's alarm inside of the Republican Party. Just weeks after the vote in Kansas on abortion rights, you now see the Democrats passing a climate and spending bill and starting to gain traction. And they're also starting to frame the Republican Party in a sharper way on the issue of democracy, running hard against election deniers, and even President Biden taking a new step in terms of his rhetoric, referring to the Republican Party, as you said, as semi-fascist.
Anthony, does our data tell us anything about the possible strength of that kind of rhetoric or any warning signs possibly for the president to go not maybe that far?
We went through the primaries, and one after another, and voters for the Republican side were saying they wanted the party not only to support Donald Trump, but they wanted Donald Trump's endorsement behind a candidate, and they also wanted Republican candidates to be talking about things like the 2020 election. All of that, other voters tell us, is out of sync with the larger electorate wants to talk about the economy. That's the number one issue. Inflation, the number one issue. So it's not just that kind of rhetoric, but it's the subject matter, too.
And you heard the Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison say the president's got this tremendous set of accomplishments. He should run for re-election. The DNC will be fully behind him. And yet our data and other data continues to show Democrats aren't yet sold on that.
Well, no, because they've got a lot of ground to make up, number one. Number two, on the House.
But they're not even sold on Biden as a re-election candidate.
Well, that
specifically.
Yeah, that may be. Look, a president is always a factor, as we've discussed, and Biden is certainly a factor. The question is, can they motivate Democrats to actually go out and support him? And what we have seen, this is changing, but what we have seen so far is Democrats a little bit more reluctant to do that than Republicans who are sort of chomping at the bit to go and vote against Joe Biden.
There's no one chomping at the bit, based on my reporting, to run against President Biden in 2024 in a Democratic primary. One of his rivals from 2020, Senator Bernie Sanders, has been in lockstep politically most of the time with President Biden when it comes to the big picture on policy. And look at the comments just this past week from California Governor Gavin Newsom comparing President Biden to FDR in terms of his governing accomplishments. Newsom's widely seen as a future presidential candidate, but he's not making any move to challenge Biden. In fact, he's praising Biden.
And looking to maybe dial back the sense that some Democrats had a month or a month and a half ago that he was trying to position himself just in case. Looked like he was dialing that back a little bit. Anthony, what to watch in the next couple of weeks?
Oh, start with the Senate. We got to start looking at the Senate. We'll be polling in a lot of these races. Some other folks have. The Senate is different from the House in that it is going to be more candidate focused. And it comes back to what I was just saying about have Republicans nominated candidates that can appeal to a wider electorate. I think we're going to see tests of that in Pennsylvania. We're going to see tests of that in Georgia. We're going to watch Arizona, among others. These will become household state names, if you will, as we go through this campaign.
And Bob, in that regard, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Ohio, all test cases for the Trump effect and this extremism label.
And there's a tension inside of the GOP, I'm picking up in my reporting, between what I would call the McConnell world of the GOP, the longtime Republican business-friendly establishment in power in the Senate, versus Senator Rick Scott, who runs the National Republicans campaign on the NRSC. There's a strategic sense that Scott is aligned with Trump and Trumpism inside the Republican Party, and that he's embraced candidates who might not have the best shot to win. So now you see McConnell and his super PAC arm, the Senate Leadership Fund, trying to do their own thing, not necessarily everything that Rick Scott's doing at the NRSC.
Intra-party maneuvering, it's not uncommon. Bob Costa, Anthony Salvanto, thanks so much, and we'll be right back. We turn now to the war in Ukraine, where fears are growing over a potential nuclear disaster at Zaporizhzhia, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patta has the latest.
There are fresh warnings of the risk of radioactive leaks at the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine and Russia have traded accusations of renewed shelling there this weekend, and on Thursday, the plant was down to a precarious last resort when it was disconnected from the grid due to fire damage. For more than 24 hours, the plant was operating on backup diesel generators.
Frankly, that is one step before the catastrophe.
Energy Minister Herman Halushenko explained a constant electricity supply is critical for cooling down spent nuclear fuel and avoiding a disastrous meltdown. If the backup generators fail, it sets in motion a chain reaction.
We have probably 1 hour and a half, 2 hours before the reaction started inside the unit.
So we narrowly escaped nuclear disaster.
I must say that we were not far.
Ukrainians living in the shadow of the reactors prepare for a worst-case scenario, and authorities are handing out iodine tablets to help protect against radiation. The minister is hopeful the United Nations nuclear watchdog will inspect the site early this week.
From our point of view, it's very important to create something like permanent mission, not just to come there, to check and to leave.
It's been just over half a year since Vladimir Putin did the unthinkable and invaded Ukraine. In the east, war-weary residents still wake up every day to a living hell. They count the dead, clear the debris. The Russians are torturing us, said Tetiana Sviahintsa. We're exhausted by the endless shelling, but we are still alive.
As the war stretches beyond the halfway mark, Ukrainians are digging in their heels, prepared for the long haul. Just today, a rash of explosions in the south and the east, which Ukrainian authorities claim destroyed Russian military bases.
Deborah Patta, thank you. The other big story we're watching is the Artemis mission. Tomorrow, NASA hopes to launch its first flight, as our Mark Strassman reports from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
NASA's now in its countdown cadence for tomorrow's launch, with its mammoth SLS rocket on pad 39B.
I think it's ready. But on launch day, I'll know.
Charlie Blackwell Thompson has final say on readiness, the Artemis I launch director.
It is that first step, or that next step, in getting humans into deep space again. And then after that, it's boots on the moon.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
In the Apollo era, America's space dream, get boots on the moon first.
Man on the moon, a walk on the moon, and yet to say the words and to stop just a moment to think about them still sends a shiver up and down the old spine.
But with Apollo 17, 3 years later, moon fatigue closed the program. No one has moonwalked since 1972.
The technology is so different than what we use today.
When Artemis I lifts off, Rick LeBrode takes charge of this test flight. Its Orion space capsule, without a crew, will go to the moon, orbit it for 3 weeks, and return to Earth. NASA's deep space hopes will ride along.
We got to have a successful flight to prove the capabilities before we put the astronauts on the next mission. Otherwise, you're not putting astronauts on the next mission.
2 Artemis missions from now, NASA intends on a moon landing. Artemis III's crew, yet to be announced, will include an astronaut of color and a woman. With Apollo, the moon was the dream. With Artemis, it's a way station to deeper space.
We want to travel to Mars, and so we need to learn how to put humans on another planetary body to live there for a long duration. And the perfect place to practice that is the lunar surface.
This one round trip will turn this Orion capsule into an instant million-miler flyer. Then again, NASA engineers also have a lot of ground to cover in these 42 days of flight. Major?
Mark Strassman, we thank you. We are joined now by astronaut Kate Rubins, a candidate for a future crewed Artemis mission. She joins us from the Kennedy Space Center. Dr. Rubins, good morning. This is a test flight. What are you looking for in terms of safety as you evaluate what we're about to see in the coming days?
Good morning. It's great to be with you. As you said, this is a test flight, and so one of the reasons that we're testing before we put humans on top of this incredible machine is to really push the edge of the envelope. So from an engineering perspective, one of our main objectives is to look at the heat shield. In order to get the heat shield at this 5,000 degree heating and check out all of our objectives around the moon, we need to do this test launch. And so we're looking for things like the loading to go well, the launch, and then our eyes are really on re-entry for the heat shield and the capsule recovery.
And for those who might remember, as I do, Apollo, what is different between the heat shield then and the heat shield stresses now?
Yeah, so we've got similar profiles and similar re-entry speeds, but the materials are completely different. So, you know, we've had 50 years in the intervening time to adopt a lot of these modern advances in material science. I work on the spacesuits, and we're actually adopting a lot of that in our new spacesuit design as well.
I mentioned that I remember Apollo. I don't remember Mercury, but I remember all the excitement nationally about the space exploration projects then. They were all almost entirely led by white men. There is a greater diversity for women and for people of color at NASA now. Talk about the component involving women such as yourself in Artemis and everything else that NASA is undertaking right now.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about the astronaut corps these days is we're not really looking at it in terms of categories anymore. We have such a great, diverse, and talented workforce. And you see this in the whole of NASA, if you look at all the centers across the U.S. So our astronaut class, we've got a diversity of backgrounds. You know, we've got scientists, engineers, fighter pilots. We've got military and civilian. We, of course, have thrown open those doors for women and people of color. And it's pretty cool to get to hang out with these people from a variety of backgrounds and see what they all bring to the program.
And Dr. Rubins, for those who might say, yes, it's been 50 years since we've been to the moon, do we need to go back? And is that the only thing we're trying to accomplish? And doesn't that feel somewhat repetitive? What would you tell them?
That is a really good question. And we do need to go back. We're going to go back in a completely different way. So the first part of this program is really to establish a sustainable lunar presence on the lunar surface and then both in orbit around the moon. This is helping us get ready for Mars. We really need to learn how to operate long-term in deep space in order to be able to explore. And the places that we're going are incredibly different. So Apollo was focused on one kind of pretty easy to get to equatorial area. We're taking the challenge on to go to the polar regions, these permanently shadowed regions. They are always in darkness. That's where we found water ice. And water ice is so crucial for things like building fuel for a Mars mission and a lot of the scientific discoveries. We've got volatile compounds in that water ice that could unlock a lot of things about how the Earth and our solar system formed.
And for a layperson like me, should we think of the moon as a potential launching platform for this eventual exploration of Mars?
It absolutely could be. It's also a place that we're probably going to take vehicles and do some long-term deep space checkouts before we really commit ourselves to a Mars voyage. And it's also where we're going to be learning about how to do extensive surface operations. So we're building new planetary suits. We're learning how we can have humans live in rovers, how they can do a human-robotic partnership to uncover a lot of terrain and explore a lot more. And what's it like to really have that sustained presence on another planetary body?
So you are a candidate to be one of these Artemis astronauts. So just personally, what's it going to be like for you tomorrow? Your level of personal scientific anticipation and maybe apprehension?
Yeah, we were talking about it with the other astronauts that are here, and everybody said, when it's your launch, you get calmer and calmer as the launch approaches because you've trained for this, you know your procedures, you've been in the sim for thousands of hours. So, you're just absolutely calm right up until the moment of liftoff. With this, we're getting more and more nervous as we go. I think we are all so excited about this. It is a test flight, so we're tempering our expectations. We got a lot of great Florida weather and those kinds of things, but we're very excited and we can feel the excitement mounting.
And very quickly, Dr. Rubins, for America, do you think this is a turning point in terms of the next phase of space exploration?
Absolutely. I really see that when I go talk to kids in classrooms all across the U.S. and you tell them, we're going to the moon, and it's something that we haven't had for several decades in terms of something to inspire kids and provide this kind of exploration activity that the whole world can look to.
Dr. Kate Rubins, we thank you so very much. CBS News will be carrying a special report tomorrow around 8:30 a.m. when the rocket is expected to launch, and we will be right back. That is it for us today. We thank you for watching. For Face the Nation, I'm Major Garrett in for Margaret. Good day.